What we're going to do next is to start working on a little bit of Workbook Script functionality. The concept behind Workbook Scripts is similar to Excel VBA code in that they both allow you to define and execute custom logic for a view. The difference in Dodeca is that we've created a library of methods and Dodeca functions for you to use so that you can build powerful functionality into your views without the need to write complicated code. In this video, we hope to demonstrate a few of the concepts involved in creating a basic workbook script. Let's start out with a simple Hello World example. Then, a little bit later, we can proceed with some more complex tutorials. The first thing that we need to do is open up the Workbook Scripts metadata editor. So from the Dodeca menu, select Admin, Workbook Scripts. From the Workbook Scripts metadata editor, press New to create a new workbook script. The relationship between workbook scripts and views is similar to the relationship between binary artifacts and views, in that a single workbook script is tied to a view using the view's metadata editor. Because this is the case, we recommend that you give the new workbook script the same ID as the view that you intend to use it with. Since we're working with the view MyReport, we'll assign our new workbook script the ID MyReport. This naming conventional is optional, but we recommend it because it helps us to remember which workbook script goes with which view. Note that even though we assign a single workbook script to a view, that doesn't prevent us from calling additional workbook scripts as subroutines. This workbook script will be the main script assigned to our current view, MyReport. After you press OK to create the new workbook script, you'll be presented with 4 sections that each control a different aspect of the new script. At the top, you'll see the definition section, labeled MyReport, then the properties section, labeled Script Properties, then the event links section, and finally the procedures section at the bottom. Let's discuss each section in turn, starting with the definition section. I'll collapse the other sections by clicking the buttons at the top. The definition section is primarily for documentation purposes, but it does have a couple of functional properties such as do tracing and debug mode. Debug mode allows you to turn on debugging for a workbook script. We'll discuss these properties in a later tutorial. The Properties section allows you to create properties that can be used by your workbook scripts. You can think of workbook script properties as variables, like those that you would use in VBA, for example. If you want to add a new property, you can right-click within the Properties section and select New from the context menu that appears. You'll notice that you can assign a name, data type, initial value, shared status, and comment to any workbook script property. The shared flag, when selected, exposes the property to all other workbook scripts beyond the current one, much like a global variable in VBA exposes the variable throughout a project. In this tutorial, we won't be needing any additional properties, so I'll go ahead and delete the one I just created. Click outside of the Properties section to set the new property, and then right-click it and select Delete from the context menu. The Event Links section allows you to create event links, which are triggers that initiate workbook script procedures. They represent specific events that can take place within a view, and they specify which procedures or actions should be executed when those specific events occur. For the purposes of this tutorial, and for any workbook script that isn't used solely as a subroutine, we'll need to add an event link. Right-click within the Event Links section, and then select New from the context menu that appears. As soon as we add the new event link, a list of events appears in the On Event drop-down selector. You'll notice that the list of available events in Dodeca is quite extensive, and it covers just about every event that can occur within a view in Dodeca. For example, there are events for before and after building a view. There are events around actions involving comments, events around the data sets and data tables used in SQL Excel views, and events around Essbase operations. In our case, we're going to select the After Sheet Retrieve event, because for our Hello World example, we'd like to display a message after the view has completed the retrieve process for a sheet. After selecting After Sheet Retrieve, make sure that the Active box is checked, and then click on the Run Procedure dropdown. Dodeca will automatically populate the Run Procedure dropdown with a default procedure name, On After Sheet Retrieve. You don't have to use this name, but the default name provided by Dodeca is a best practices suggestion, so we'll just use that. After a run procedure name is provided, you can press the Tab key or click outside of the current cell to have Dodeca prompt you to add a new procedure with the name specified. We'll keep the default name, so go ahead and press Yes to add a new procedure called On After Sheet Retrieve to the workbook script. You'll see that the new procedure's been added to the workbook script under the Procedures section. At this point, we're done with the Event Links section, and we can move on to Procedures. I'll go ahead and auto-hide the Runtime View selector to give myself a little more room to work, and then we can proceed. Let's talk a little bit about procedures in Dodeca for a moment before we continue. Procedures are made up of one or more methods, which are available actions built into Dodeca. Each method contains a number of arguments that tailor the action to your specific needs within the view. You'll notice the hierarchical structure of this section of the Workbook Scripts metadata editor. On After Sheet Retrieve is the procedure. The method we're about to select will go here, and under that, we'll see the arguments for that method. At this point, let's go ahead and select a method from the drop-down labeled Select a Method. Remember that methods are actions that can be performed within a view in Dodeca. We've written the code behind all of the available methods in Dodeca, so all you'll need to do is provide the arguments for the methods you wish to use. Scroll down through the list of available methods and find the Show Message Box method. Select Show Message Box, and then press the Tab key or click outside of the current cell, and you'll be presented with the list of available arguments for the chosen method and overload. We should talk for a second about overloads. Overloads allow you to choose one of various different ways of performing an action. The Show Message Box method performs a very simple action, namely displaying a message box, so it only has one overload type available, General. If, for instance, we had chosen the Essbase Run Calc method, which performs an Essbase calc operation, we would need to choose an overload that corresponded to the way in which we wanted the action to be performed. For Essbase Run Calc, the overload Default Calc runs the cube's default calc. The overload Server-based runs an Essbase calc defined on the server, and the overload Text-based runs an Essbase calc defined in the script text argument of the Essbase Run Calc method. In short, overloads determine the way that a method action will be performed, and they also determine the set of arguments that are available for that method. These arguments specify sheet by, sheet spec, address, cell by cell, reverse order, method condition, and cell condition control the execution of the current workbook script method. The specify sheet by and sheet spec arguments control which sheet or sheets the workbook script will be executed for or on. By default, the method action will be performed on the active sheet. The address argument allows you to specify a specific address on which the method action will be executed. If that address has multiple cells, you can check the cell by cell box to execute the method action for each cell in the address. For example, if you wanted to loop through a range of cells and change the formatting of those cells based on their individual values, you would want to check the box for the cell-by-cell argument. Reverse order works with cell by cell in that it executes the method action for each cell in the given range, but it starts at the end of the range and works back to the beginning. Reverse order can be useful, for example, if you're deleting rows, or any case in which you wish to process the cells at the bottom of the given range before proceeding to the top. The method condition and cell condition arguments are used to specify the conditions under which the method action is executed, either in general or for a specific cell. For now, we'll leave the method condition and cell condition arguments hard-coded to true. This tells Dodeca to execute the method action under any circumstances within the view. In a later tutorial, we'll demonstrate the ways in which we can use Excel functions in these and other arguments to determine whether a method action should be executed at all or for any given cell in a range. The remaining arguments for the showMessageBox method are specific to the method, and they control, in this case, the parameters of the message box that will be displayed. Most of these arguments are self-explanatory. The message controls the text displayed in the message box, the caption controls the caption of the message box, and the icon allows you to choose the icon displayed. The buttons argument controls which buttons will be displayed on the message box. The default button argument controls which button is selected by default. The options argument controls various other options pertaining to the message box that will be displayed. The property name and property data type arguments allow you to store the value returned by the message box to a workbook script property. So in Dodeca, if you want to retain the value returned by the message box for use in another workbook script, procedure, or method, you can specify the property name and property data type in which the message box return value will be stored. For this tutorial, we'll be displaying a simple Hello World message box after every sheet retrieve, based on our event link and method selections. So for the message argument, simply type Hello World or any custom message you wish to display. We now have a simple but functioning workbook script. Go ahead and press Commit to commit the new workbook script to the database and save all the changes. Our new workbook script is now available for use within Dodeca. The next step is to assign the workbook script to a view. Select the View's Metadata editor from the Dodeca admin menu, or simply right-click on the view from within the Runtime View selector and choose Edit View My Report from the context menu that appears. Go ahead and filter the visible properties down with the Common button, and then scroll down to the Workbook Script category. Select the Workbook Script ID property, and then choose My Report from the drop-down to the right. Commit the changes to the view, and then rerun the report by clicking on it in the View selector. Because of the event link we're using, after sheet retrieve, we'll be prompted with a message box each time the retrieve process is completed for a sheet. Because our view's cascaded, we'll see a message box for each sheet in the cascade. If we alter our selections, we'll get a different number of message boxes, one for each sheet retrieved. I'll limit my selection to COLA for product, and with 2 selections for measures, we should see 2 message boxes. 1, 2. Now let's say that we want to pick up some information from the report and use it to expand our Hello World example to include the name of each sheet after it's retrieved. Go ahead and close the open instance of My Report, as well as the View's Metadata editor, which we're now finished with, and return to the Workbook Scripts metadata editor. Return to the Show Message Box method of the onAfterSheetRetrieve procedure and find the message argument again. What we'll do now is explore the two options available in Dodeca for making our message dynamic. First, we can use Excel formulas to obtain information about or located on the worksheet and include that in our message box. Almost every workbook script method argument in Dodeca can be computed using Excel formulas and functions. In this case, we're going to use an Excel formula to compute the message that we want to display in our message box. Excel formulas can be supplemented with Dodeca workbook script functions. Dodeca workbook script functions were created to provide information about a view that's not available to the Excel calculation engine. This means that you can easily obtain information for your arguments, such as the S-base data point information for a given cell. We'll demonstrate a Dodeca function in a few minutes, but for now, let's just use an Excel formula to obtain the name of each sheet after it's retrieved. In order to edit the message argument in a Dodeca editor, right-click on it and select Edit Text from the context menu that appears. Alternately, you can use the keyboard shortcut Shift F2 to open this particular editor. First, we need to consider what information we want to obtain from the worksheet. I'll close the message editor and return to my report. Say that we're interested in displaying the sheet name. You'll notice that the sheet names are based on the product and measures selections, which are located at cells B4 and C4 on each worksheet. Return to the Workbook Script metadata editor, and with the message argument selected, reopen the message editor by pressing Shift F2. So what we want to do is obtain the values of cells B4 and C4 in order to determine the name of the sheet that's just been retrieved. In order to do this, we'll use simple Excel string concatenation to create a message containing the values displayed on the sheet at cells B4 and C4. Begin the argument value with an equal sign to tell Dodeca that this represents an Excel formula that needs to be evaluated using Dodeca's Excel calculation engine. Then, start with a double quote, followed by whatever string text you wish to include before the values of the cells. We're using the following string: double quote, hello world, sheet, space, and then 3 double quotes. This is followed by ampersand, $B, $4, ampersand, double quote, dash, double quote, ampersand, $C, $4, ampersand, and then the closing string text. 3 double quotes, has been retrieved. Double quote. So in our new message argument, the equal sign indicates that we're using an Excel formula. The double quotes indicate the beginning or end of a string. 2 double quotes in a row is an Excel formula escape character that we're using to represent a single double quote in the final string. The ampersand is the Excel formula concatenation character that joins the strings before and after it. $B, $4, and $C$4 represent the cells containing our selections for products and measures. At this point, our message is complete, so go ahead and press OK, and then commit the changes to the database. Rerun my report, and now our message boxes report that COLA-sales has been retrieved, and that COLA-cost of goods sold has been retrieved. And we did this by picking up information off of the actual worksheets. Earlier, I had said that there were two ways of dynamically populating workbook script method arguments: Excel formulas and Dodeca functions. In the previous changes that we made to the example, we used an Excel formula to pull data off of our worksheets and display it in our message box. Now, let's extend our Hello World message box to include some S-based data point information using a Dodeca function. Dodeca functions are extremely useful in situations where you'd like to obtain information, in this case, S-based data point information, that isn't readily available on the worksheet and can't be obtained through Excel formulas and functions. Let's say that we want to obtain a list of the dimension and member names for the data point at cell B6. Close the open instance of my report and return to the Workbook Scripts metadata editor. Find the Show Message Box method of the onAfter sheet retrieve procedure. We'll need to edit the message argument one last time, so launch the message editor by right-clicking on the message argument and selecting Edit Text from the context menu that appears. Remember, alternately you can just press Shift F2 to launch the editor for any selected argument. We'll start by adding onto our string. The data point at B6 is. Now we'll insert our Dodeca function into the string using the Functions drop-down at the top of the message editor. You'll notice that there are a large number of Dodeca functions available. We'll cover more of them in a later tutorial, but for now, just scroll down until you find the function called DataPointDimValuesMembers and select it. Now we'll press the Insert Function button to the left to insert the Dodeca function into the message editor. At this point, it's worth noting that Dodeca functions return string values to the Excel calculation engine. So our Dodeca function, @dpdimValsMembers, needs to be placed inside of the final double quote in the text of our message. Anytime you wish to use a Dodeca function within an Excel formula, you should treat it just as you would a string of text. In this case, that means making sure it's enclosed within double quotes. Many Dodeca functions, such as dpdimValsMembers, can be passed parameters. When a Dodeca function is inserted into an editor using the Insert Function button, all available parameters for that function are displayed enclosed in angle brackets, with optional parameters being additionally enclosed in square brackets. You'll notice that all of the parameters for @dpdimValsMembers are enclosed in angle brackets and square brackets. This means that all of this Dodeca function's parameters are optional. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're only going to use the cell address parameter to specify the address of the data point that we want to return information about, which is B6. So remove the unnecessary optional parameters and in place of cell address, type $B, $6. Press OK, and then press Commit to save the changes to the database. Choose My Report once again from the Runtime View selector, and we can now see that for our first sheet, the data point at cell B6 is year equals Q1, measures equals sales, product equals 100-10, market equals east, and scenario equals actual. We'll also see the data point for our second sheet. So now we have a functional Dodeca workbook script that displays information about the worksheets using an Excel formula, and it also displays S-based data point information about an address on the worksheets using a Dodeca function. Finally, you may have noticed that even though our message boxes are displayed after their sheets are retrieved, the worksheets are not visible in the background. This is because, by default, Dodeca covers the worksheets during processing. Let's say that we want to make sure that our worksheets appear in the background when our message boxes are displayed. There's a workbook script method, setCover, that allows us to set the state of that cover to false. Close the open instance of My Report one last time, and return to the Workbook Scripts metadata editor. This time, we're going to insert a new method, setCover. To do so, right-click on the existing Show Message Box method and choose Insert a New Method above the selected row from the context menu that appears. We want to execute the setCover method before we show our message box, so that's why we're inserting it above the selected row. Scroll down and select the setCover method. Then press the Tab key or click outside of the current cell to display the available arguments for the setCover method. Like Show Message Box, the setCover method only has one available overload, General. The default settings for the first 7 arguments are fine, so all we need to do is change the value of the cover argument to false by selecting it from the drop-down. Go ahead and commit the changes to the database, and then run a new instance of My Report. You can now see that the worksheets are visible in the background while our message boxes are displayed. In this video, we've covered the basics of workbook scripting and the Workbook Scripts metadata editor in Dodeca, as well as demonstrating the ways that workbook scripts can leverage Excel formulas and our internal Dodeca functions to provide information about workbooks, their data, and their off-sheet data sources. We also demonstrated a simple workbook script method, setCover, that begins to show the ways in which workbook scripts can control Dodeca's user interface as well. If you'd like any additional information about workbook scripting, keep an eye out for some upcoming installments of the Dodeca Workbook Scripts video series, where we'll begin to cover some more advanced topics. Also, registered users of AppliedOLAP.com can view our workbook script reference guide, which contains detailed explanations of all available event links, methods, overloads, arguments, and Dodeca functions. You can find the first page of the reference guide at www.appliedolap.com/dodeca/support/event-links. Finally, all future releases of the Dodeca framework will include the Workbook Script reference guide as well, located in the documentation folder under Applied OLAP Dodeca Framework on the Start menu.